Frischen. Today is Sunday. A ganzen Tag. A whole day is Sunday. You know what that means? That Sunday has to do with Teva. And Teva is always the same. Say David Shabbat. There's a word from the middle of Rebbe. The word from the middle of Rebbe. The context is not important, but the middle of Rebbe says, "In Horting ganzen ken asogenit, vifol es Tanya lemailo derech hateva." The middle of Rebbe said, you have no idea how valuable lemailo teva is. Why? It's a creation of the Eibishter. Now, it happens to make it difficult to see him, but we're actually looking at him. But for some reason, we don't identify it as him. We identify it as some other nonsense. Yeah, but we're looking at a lakus. Okay, morgen heeft zich aan de Yemei Purim. Right, the Mishnah Purim starts with all the days. You know that as well, but it's in the Mishnah. Right, the pasuk says lo yaver. It doesn't go past, but it goes before. So this is the 5 days of Purim. Charlie has 57 years of Chanukah. The Mishnah has 5 days of Purim. But okay, now we're in the middle of a conversation. Okay. We're learning Tanya, Peirik Gimel, and we've been sitting here for a long time. I think this is our 9th class. The whole Peirik is an Omid. And what's been going on over the last several weeks is we have been discussing his bonanus. That's the issue. We've been discussing his bonanus. We've been talking about the idea of his bonanus. The translation of the word his bonanus is contemplation. And as I underscored, as I emphasized, the concept of contemplation means to proactively use the mind. His bonanus is not about clearing the mind. His bonanus is not at all spiritual. It's not a ruchnizdike exercise. It's an intellectual exercise. It's a seichel exercise that you do on purpose and with a focus and with a clear sense of what you're doing. You use your mind, like the Rambam's wording, Keitzad Yove Lavose Lirose Kishayis Bein. If you're going to love the Eibishter and you're going to fear the Eibishter, you're going to have to think about him. Right? That's the Rambam. Think about the Lakus. This is called his bonanus, with 2 nuns. Where you contemplate an inyan chassidus. And it says in the middle of the Rebbe, and the Rebbe quotes this dozens of times, maybe more, maybe hundreds of times even, that the middle of the Rebbe said that his bonus has to be the process. When a person contemplates a lakus, he can't just think big picture. He has to go into the nitty-gritty. He has to think it through like a concept, like a limud, like an eel. And part of the reason you have to think it through beprotius, because if you want that to be a daita hayoim should bring to v'hashivesa elav avecha, that what you understand in your mind should arouse, it should wake up. Your heart, you need time. You need time to go, as we discussed 2 weeks ago, asura mikan le'eskarev l'sham, to go away from where you are, to go into the world of Gettlichkeit, and then to immerse yourself in Seichel Eliki until there will be a certain Regel Shalev, right? Like Reb David HaRadaka gesagt, a Kitzelton. But okay, so 2 weeks ago we talked about his bonanus. Last week we also talked about his bonanus. And last week, what we added about his bonanus was the idea that there's an interesting irony to the exercise. The whole purpose of thinking about the Eibishter is to get excited, but you don't let yourself get excited. Why? Because the more quickly you get excited, the less deep that excitement is going to be. So it's a mind game that involves a dichotomy, it involves a duality, a contradiction, where you're using your mind to arouse your heart, but your mind and heart contradict each other. So you have to let the mind do what it has to do. And only when you're finished and you're left with a bechein, there's a tava, I mentioned to you last week, the chassid whose name was Chaim Yena. I mean, I went home and I edited this class, and where I remember I had the whole thing, I couldn't remember his name. I went in and I put in Chaim Yena, and it took out the whole shtickle where I was embarrassing myself. Chaim Yena Lutzki, I think he Chaim Yena. Chaim Yena was a Tomim. The Rebbe Rashab said of him that he asks questions like Chassidim of the Alter Rebbe, which is absolutely mind-blowing. And the Rebbe Rashab told of Chaim Yena as of the Chassidim Vatzneach, Lechas, he should behave tzanua. I mean, the story, I told you stories about this of Chaim Yena, that the Rebbe Rashab came to him in a dream after Tafresh Pei, at the Beis Nissen, and said, Chassidim of Chaim Yena came into the Zal, and he told people, he didn't think it was a big deal. Mustabi comes to me, comes to you. And the Friedrich Rebbe son. And the Frierdiker Rebbe says to him, I don't understand. How do you tell people that the Rebbe came? He said, I'm Chassidus. So he says, what's the big deal? He came to me, came to him. He says, so the Rebbe, I asked him, he goes, so who should my father come to if not for you? The Rebbe Rashab never came again. Because he revealed it. And I told you that Rebbe Rashab told him to behave at Snei Aleches. So he would come into the shul and he would say that he had theater tickets for him and his wife. So again, the theater, he would lay in bed a whole day as if he's asleep. And he'd get up, you would see the bed was soaked with tears. Because the Rebbe Rashab had him gesagt in that time that he has to do tznius. And the Rebbe said about him that he's holding by Chimes HaMeach V'Alev. Chimes HaMeach V'Alev, which is sometimes called Mechem Dekavus, is that this dichotomy, this contradiction doesn't exist, that the brain and the heart are not a conflict. But that's a very high madrege, you understand? Most people, the brain is supposed to bring to the heart, and the brain and the heart conflict. So you have to suppress the emotions so that you can see this long enough that when the heart is aroused, it should be of meaning, of significance. Now, I'm not going to bother reading inside. I mean, on page Zayin Amud Beis, which is page 14, how many lines on the top of the page? 7 lines on the page. And I told you last week that I wanted to talk about this. And again, a lot of the things I'm sharing with you, we don't need to understand Pshat and Tanya. We could have skipped last week's class. We could have skipped 2 weeks ago's class. It would have been just fine. But these are important ideas in Chassidus. And this is the place in Tanya to talk about them. Later on, we're not going to discuss. So we're sort of learning in Yonim into the Tanya, which are written here, but B'kitzeh, the B'demet, are just mentioned, referred to, alluded to. And I'm sharing these ideas with you because I think they're interesting, and I think on some level even important. Maybe it's not important because tomorrow you're going to go out and do it, but they're important because it gives you a sense of how Chassidus is designed, how Chassidus is structured. And I'm going to begin with a simple akdama, yeah? There is a very basic part of Chassidus Chabad which is called Trachten Chassidus, to think Chassidus, everybody knows. Trachten Chassidus, yeah, Mashpiyim. Emes Mashpiyim, yeah. It's the demand for the Bochens on Trachten Chassidus. The two people who did this to some measure of success since the Holocaust were Rav Shlomo Chaim and Reb Nissen. Rav Shlomo Chaim Kesselman was Emes Mashpiyim. His whole life was his Talmidim. He was a big chassid, but his whole life was Talmidim. Reb Nissen was the Eved Elokim, he was a servant, he was a slave of the Eibishter, who also encouraged his Bacham to Trachten Chassidus, but Reb Nissen influenced his Bacham more by what he was than by what he told them. Reb Nissen was Reb Nissen. You got from Reb Nissen not what he said, but the fact that you saw a Jew who thought 15 times before he put a piece of bread in his mouth, kipshute. Somebody told me that he ate once with the Mishnah Suda. When he davened, his face would turn tomato red. And when he ate, his fed was even redder. Like he was such a serious Jew. And that his ashpah was primarily who he was. The Rav Shlomo Chaim was a richtige mashpia, a real mashpia. They have Talmidim, and now we're already dealing with Talmidov. But any case, in any event, thinking Chassidus is the basic part of Chabad Avodah. And of course, thinking Chassidus is not done in free form. You don't just sit down and think an idea. That's not the way this is done. First of all, as I discussed with you at length, and I really don't want to repeat myself, thinking Chassidus is a skill you have to develop. The first thing you discover when you try to think Chassidus is how terrible your concentration is. Your mind is all over the neighborhood. You know, I remember doing this as a boy at 16 years old. I had an elder book. I said, think a page of Tanya. Just one thing. Every time your mind wanders, start to the top of the page again. I never finished the page. Because the mind wandered every 4 seconds. The mind here and here, someplace else. You don't discover how poor your concentration is when you try to concentrate. You have to learn how to do it. And then you get all uptight and you get nervous and verkletched, which is so antithetical to any kind of, it makes you crazy, it makes you mad, and it doesn't help the concentration. You have to learn how to relax, which is so difficult. Because concentration and relaxation is like hot water and cold water. You got to mix them together, and the hot should be hot and the cold should be cold. It shouldn't be tepid. But okay, it's a whole avodah. Trachten Chassidus is a job. It's a very, very involved job. So you learn a maimer from the Rebbe, and of course the whole idea is you get to choose which. And you think the maimer, that's what you do. Tzach Chassidus means you think what the Rabbi said. So little children think Tanya, bigger Bacham think of maimer Chassidus. But you don't think every day a different maimer, you think the same thing 100 times. Every day you can think Chassidus, same maimer 100 times, 3 months, 4 months. And when you thought of maimer 100 times, it's kind of hard to forget. It becomes one with you. And then you move to a different maimer. That's how it's done. That's how the thinking Chassidus is done. So then here comes the issue that I want to share with you today. If you learn Chassidus Chabad is very big. It's big, it's huge, it's massive. It's probably equal to the rest of the entire Hasidic library. In other words, if you take the Chassidus from all the Chassidish Gute Yidden, beginning with the Baal Shem Tov and the Meditcher Maggid, and the Baal Shem Tov disciples, the Maggid disciples, and then the disciples of disciples. There's a lot of Sforim. You could fill a bookcase, maybe 2 bookcases. Chassidus Chabad is probably equal in size to the entire Hasidic library. Maybe it's even larger. Now, for much of our history, this material was not printed. In the last 30 years, 35 years, close to 40 years, the Rebbe suddenly opened up the doors, and he printed hundreds of volumes of Chassidus. The Kamos is extraordinary. It's extraordinary. Between Tavshin Lamed Ches and Tavshin Nun Beis, which is 15 years, there may have been 100 books of Chassidus printed, maybe more. It's just incredible how much. Wiffel. And when you learn Chassidus, there's a lot of things you learn about learning Chassidus. There's a lot of repetition. You develop a sense of the structure of Maimonides Chassidus. You see how the Rabbeim, all 7 Rebbes, are really one thing. They're developing ideas generation after generation after generation in a way that's very special, very powerful. But you also learn that there's sugyas. Chassidus goes in topics. Chassidus is not just an event in life. There's a design, there's a structure to it. And there are topics. And when a topic is raised, usually it'll go in the same direction as all the other times that topic is raised. Sometimes it'll be a page, sometimes it'll be 10 pages, sometimes it'll be 100 pages, but it's the same topic. It's just more developed, more elaborate, more opened up, and so on. Yeah. And you get to develop a chush of how a Maimer Chassidus will develop a topic. And the result of this is that there are a handful, not a handful, a couple of dozen, maybe a little more, of sugyas topics within Chassidus, and you get this topic sugyas in Chassidus. It's not that many, like I said. It's 20, 25, maybe it's more, but I don't think it's that many. And these different topics would be the classic Hizbonanos. In other words, if a person was thinking Chassidus, he would think an idea in Chassidus, but he would think an idea in Chassidus about the Eibishter, obviously, right? Emphasis, all of Chassidus is about the Eibishter, but some sugyas of Chassidus are very directly about the Eibishter. And when a person thinks Chassidus to come closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he really has a choice. You can choose which one you want. You can choose one you like. I have an elder Bacher, a mashpia of mine, that his mashpia told him he should think ha'umnam. Whatever, don't worry about it. But it's one of those maimorim that mashpiyim have been saying since the ha'umnam was written, that people should think it's a maimer Achtas Hashem. It's a classic maimer Achtas Hashem. It's like Chassidus. It's a different topic. What you learn as you dig a little deeper is that these topics go in categories. I once actually have a list someplace on my computer of a whole bunch of these meditations, and how these meditations are broken up into groups. Okay? And here's the issue. We all understand, it's common sense, but everybody also knows that common sense is most uncommon, right? That when a person is serving the Eibishter, and he wants to come closer to the Eibishter, the biggest sin he could commit in that endeavor is lie to himself. If you're looking for emes, and you're looking for emes bet hasheket, what kind of idiot are you? No one's asking you to do it. You're choosing to do it. You're choosing to do it because you want to do it. And you tell you something. Don't lie to you. Right? The worst kind of liar is a liar who's never going to be exposed. If you lie to somebody else, one day he's going to come back and say, Mr. Lignit. But you lie to yourself, who's going to tell you? And when it comes to Inyoni Avoida, especially when it comes to what we call Avoida Pnimis, I mean, not Stam Avoida, should I be careful about this hidden mitzvah, but Avoida about connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu through Moyach and Lev, through mind and heart. If a person is not honest with himself, He's a prisoner, la'olam v'ad. He'll never escape that prison. You have to say the truth to yourself. And of course, the truth that you have to tell yourself is, I'm not Itchid Masmith. That's the truth of the matter. I'm a zlob. I'm a simple Yid. I'm also a Yid. What's the Lashon? Oh, I'm not going to remember it. It means I don't want to miss out. I'm also a Yid. I also want to connect to the Mibishter. I forgot the Lashon in Tanya. Loi something anoichi mimena. I don't want to be cheated and take a small person, but I'm a Yid, and I want to serve the Eibush to the best of what I'm able to do. So when it comes to his bonus, when it comes to avodah pnimius, this becomes very serious. And here's what it comes down to. When you think about the Eibush, you have to remember that you're also thinking about yourself. In other words, not I'm thinking about the Eibishter and me and him are buddies. That's the point. I'm thinking about the Eibishter and now I have to have a connection to him. I have to have a connection to the Eibishter. If I have to have a connection to the Eibishter, as much as I don't like to admit it, one of the words in that sentence is the word I. Now, the whole Chassidus talks about netokenich, there's no I. Oh yeah? Bizin keshene, you understand? There's no I. There's no I until somebody I. I told you the story many times how a chassid refused to pay a debt on the grounds of Achtas Hashem. The lender comes to the borrower, asking for money. He says, "Listen, I will give you the money back, but you don't exist. I don't exist. Time doesn't exist. The loan doesn't exist. I'm not paying you back." A ganem using Chassidus Chabad Achtas Hashem, right? Okay. So the Tzemach Tzedek called this fellow, and he came to the Tzemach Tzedek, and Tzemach Tzedek said, "Is it true?" He says, "Absolutely true. I never took a loan. He doesn't exist." So Tzemach Tzedek said that benemen dem gar nicht, mit der Weglegung of dem gar nicht, wenn man reinschmeißen mit dem gar nicht, wird man sehen, sie alles ist gar nicht. In other words, if Achtas Hashem works when you're trying to save money, but it doesn't serve when you're being beaten, then there's no Achtas Hashem. If the same Ein Eid Milvade works when someone punches you in the nose, as like when someone gives you a loan, then Taka you have to pay back. So they gave him a few clap, and mitamo, he existed again, and the money appeared. Because Ein Eid Milvade is not selective, you understand? So when you are involving yourself in this bonus in the Eibishter, have to talk to you. And if you're not a big chassid, you're a little chassid, so you do a little bonus, that's what you do. There are taka higher madregas, much higher madregas. But the worst thing a mizbeinin can do, if you are learning about the Eibishter, because you want to bring the Eibishter into your heart, into your mind, and relate to him personally, so that you should therefore be sur meran, asay tei, vake shalom and asay, you should be a better Jew. The worst thing you can do is let his bonus become a fantasy. To think about the Eibishter in a way which is not real, because you're left with nothing. So therefore, when a person chooses a hisbonenus, the choice of this bonus is not only based on, I like this maimer, but this maimer talks to me. And when I say me, I don't mean my neshama, I mean my nefesh habamis. And I don't mean my nefesh habamis because I'm a smart guy and my ego is going to become stronger. I mean the behemoth, you understand? The behemoth that wants to be lazy and heavy and indulgent and weak and afraid. That's what you have to talk to. Yeah? So you're doing a hisbonenus. If you're going to start thinking in Yonich Chassidus and your behemoth is going to lay on his couch and wait for you to finish, are you done? Okay, now let's go have a pizza. You understand? Nothing. So this is the tricky part. But this bonus has to be a little bit where you are holding. To give you a realistic example, which is very down to earth. It's not part of my prepared speech, but I think on the way out last week it sort of came up. Yeah. If a person wants to think about Hashem in a way that's going to make Hashem realer to him or her, so that the reality of the Eibishter is going to be more real when it comes to a nisayon against an aveda or a nisayon against the difficulties of doing a mitzvah. Yeah, think about Hashgacha Pratis. Not the way Hashgacha Pratis is written in a book, but Hashgacha Pratis is in your life. We all see Hashgacha Pratis. I told you the story a while back. How a Yid came to the Rebbe told him that his mitzvah that he should do to heal the illness that he had is the mitzvah of Hashgacha Pratis. What's the mitzvah of Hashgacha Pratis? To identify in your life. The Rebbe told, it's such a great story. The Rebbe told Velvel Green, Allah Shalom. It's such a great story. It's such a Rebbe story. Velvel Green was a biologist. He was a good one and a very successful one. a big career, successful career as a professor and as a researcher. And when he first came to the Rebbe says, quote, I want you to do me a favor. That was what the Rebbe's commenting. I want you to do me a favor. The Rebbe said, I want you to do me a favor. The Rebbe said, what's the favor? I want you to take a little notebook. Every time you see an event in your life that is the hand of God, write it down. That was a favor. Now he never did it, but he got the message. He never wrote that legend. I want you to do me a favor. Then he's talking to a scientist. A scientist. Now you know how hard it is for a scientist to become a believer. There's miles and miles of ice that's been packed on for 200 years to make it so difficult to be a believer, not to keep mitzvahs, to be a believer. To see God in nature. The whole science is about that nature. God is nature. There's no outside of it. So the Rebbe doesn't give him proofs and philosophies. Do me a favor. When you see it, write it down. And how often you see Hashgacha Pratis? 10 times a day. It's not always big and dramatic. It's not always... But we see Hashgacha all the time. All the time. Hashgacha, Yena, you see Nochana. Pay attention. What happens to a person who's a scientist that pays attention to Hashgacha Pratis? He says, listen, I got questions, and I don't know how to figure out the science with what the Torah says, but I see it with my eyes. I see him with my eyes. So what am I going to do? I got intellectual problems, but I see it with my eyes. No, so the problem is solved. It's not solved intellectually. It's solved where it matters, in day-to-day living. You see the Eibishter in your life. That's a simple meditation. First one who is bonus. Think about Hashgacha Pratis. You think about Hashgacha. You see the Eibishter holding you by the hand. And I remember the Rebbe once said in the Fabrengen, Nem ein Woch von dein Leben. He was talking to an individual. He, of course, didn't say his name, but it was a Yid who was complaining. Take 1 week of your life. Und seh, wie der Eibishter nimmt dir bei dem Hand and führt dir. And watch how Hashem takes it. He said, there's so many things that happen in 1 week. If one of them goes wrong, your whole life is spinning in the wrong direction. And the Eibishter takes you from here to here. Just pay attention. And the Rebbe said it in a lot of instructions. The Rebbe said it in a tone of a Fabrengen, not in the tone of a Maimer. The heart to the heart, you know. So that's the point. His bonus has to talk to you. So therefore, when a person thinks chassidus, he has to choose the chassidus which he's holding by. So the way it works is this. This is the order of it. Okay, now I'm going to become a teacher. Okay, we're going to talk some scholarship over here. There are 3 levels of his bonus, and then there's a caveat. His bonus is very hard to put in a place. Okay? The 3 levels of his bonus are written here. Memale Kalalmin, Seviv Kalalmin, and Kulak Meklach Hashem. Those are the 3 his bonus. And for each one, there's a handful of psukim. In other words, like I told you before, you could open up a Maimer Chassidus. I actually wrote a list. I wrote a list of his bonus for each one of these 3 groups. Like, for example, from Memale Kalalmin, one of his bonus would be Kihu Chayecha. The Eibishter is your life. Kihu Chayecha. The Eibishter is your life. I breathe Eibishter. I eat Eibishter. Everything I do is the Eibishter giving. Kihu Chayecha means the Eibishter gives me a life. We're not yet talking about the Eibishter as a creator. I exist. I am. Ani Yossi. Ich bin. And the Eibishter gives me a life. And the psukim that support it, like I said, is Yichayecha. Re'ei Yanechi Neis Nefnecha Mayim Es Achayim Es Atei Es Amobet Es Ara Uvacharta B'Chayim. You see life and death. Choose life. What's life? Kiss the hand that feeds you, not the hand that doesn't feed you. And if you learn the Maimer Chassidus that explains this pasuk, and there are others, the Maimer Chassidus will describe one thing. The Eibishter gives life to the world. In ideal language, Ma neshama mamala yesaguf, kacha kodesh baruch mamala yeselim. Just like the Eibishter, the neshama fills the body, the Eibishter fills the world. This is not even about creation. We're not yet even talking about the Eibishter as a creator. We're simply talking about the Eibishter as a provider. That's the type of mamale kalam. How the Eibishter is revealed to us in our lives. That's what the word mamale means. Revealed in giving us life. It's a very low hisbonenus. It's so low that people would be embarrassed to be caught thinking such a thing in Chassidus. But you know what? It talks to us. Wir verstehen das because why? It's true. It's nice to be, like I said, Itcher the Masmed, or Ich weiß wer, Reb Geshem Ber Paharer, or Reb Hillel Paritcher, or Reb Zalman Desmir, but we ain't, you understand? We ain't. We're not, and we're not by our own choice, we're not by the Eibishter's choice. I have a Shabbos, I sit with my kids on Shabbos, I tell them stories. So yesterday I told them a Maisa. It was a chos, it was an Alter Rebbe, his name was Mordechai Lepler. Mordechai Lepler lived in Petersburg, which is a big city. Petersburg of 1800 compared to New York of today, it's not even a neighborhood, you understand? It's Williamsburg, Tzachakal, you can't compare the population. The numbers of people in New York is one of those densest populations in the world. I mean, it's not the most dense, but it's a lot of people in a small space. And the Alter Rebbe was mafli, this chosin, how could a Yid live in a big city and be a madrigas beinani? In other words, if you're going to be a beinani, live in a shtetl. Live in a shtetl. Live in a shtetl where there's no taivas, there's no newspaper, there's no radio, there's no running water, yeah? And there's no opportunity to do anything but learn and daven. There's just nothing to do. So the Alter Rebbe said about one of his chassidim that he lived in a big city. Look, think about us. Think about us. The Alter Rebbe, the story I told my children was that the Alter Rebbe, when he was let go from prison the second time, the government of Russia said they wanted to stay in Petersburg. And the rule in Petersburg was the Jews were not allowed to live or visit and stay overnight because of anti-Semitism, whatever, politics. Unless you had a special passport. The government of Russia was prepared to abolish this law to allow any chassid who wished to come to Petersburg stay as long as he wanted. They wanted to watch him because they realized how powerful he is and they were afraid. And the Alter Rebbe didn't want. And the Alter Rebbe said that yeshivas krachim kosher. Living in a big city is hard. He was stuck in Petersburg for about 9 months. After Tisha B'Av, a goy negotiated with the government they should leave Petersburg on a condition. And the condition was that the Alter Rebbe should live in the land which is under his jurisdiction. And this is why the Alter Rebbe moved from Lozna to Liadi. Because it was a guy, I think his name is Lubarmiski, or something like that, who was a Tzachang Gishtalti, he negotiated with the government, he'll watch the Alter Rebbe, he shouldn't become a common criminal, the Alter Rebbe, yeah? But he didn't want to live in a big city. Didn't. It's impoverished, and it's poor materially. And spiritually, it's lichtig, and it's varem, yeah? And then 100 and some years later, the Rebbe Rashab left Lubavitch, and he moved to Rostov, he repeated the same statement, yeshivas krachim kosher. To live in a big city is tough, but on this occasion, the Rebbe wasn't even a choice. This is Ratzon Elyon, so it's not our fault, it's our reality. Yeah? We're teeny tiny little city, but we're still Jews, you understand? And a Yid wants a relationship with the Eibishter and has a relationship with the Eibishter and he has to develop it. So when you think of the Eibishter as a provider, that's very selfish. You're really thinking about you. And then you know what? That's absolutely fact. It's absolutely true. You are. But if this is where you're holding, this is what you do. And if you say, no, I want to think you're the Chedillah. Why? It's more sophisticated. It's more mystical. It's more Kabbalistic. What about the Yetzer Hara? Oh, work it out. How are you going to work it out? You're not speaking to the Yetzer Hara. Yetzer Hara is waiting for you to finish. Like I said, he's sprayed out on a couch, waiting for you to finish your egocentric exercise. When you're done, it takes you for a pizza. In fact, they got to you. You understand? And that's the touch of Malik Kalam. And like I'm telling you, there's a bunch of his bonus. There's a bunch of them. A handful. Hashamayim, Misaprim, Keveid, Kale. Umase, Yodov, Magad, Rakia. It's his bonus of Chassidus. It's davening of Shabbos. Let the sky tell the story of the Eibishter. You look up at the sky, you look at the universe, and you see what the Eibishter made, you say, amazing. Shame. A fanem, a groiskeit, a reichkeit, a schenkeit. I'm sorry that I'm speaking in Yiddish. It's large, it's beautiful, it's rich, it's meaningful. So you're not even seeing the Eibishter as a creator. You're seeing the Eibishter as an artist. Someone who gives you something beautiful to look at and pleasant to smell and good to the taste and meaningful to touch and so on. You see and you hear and you smell and you taste. So you're doing a hizbonon. It's not even the Eibush as a creator. So this is another pasuk which considers us, raise up your eyes to the heavens and see me, but who made all of this? And this pasuk can go both ways, but one of the ways this pasuk goes is it doesn't talk about creation. It simply discusses the amazing world the Eibishter gave us to live in, and the amazing life the Eibishter gave us to live. So you're doing a meditation, a hisbonenus, contemplation. And it's a contemplation which doesn't mean I don't exist. Fakert. The whole contemplation is based on the principle that I do exist. But I'm beholden. I'm indebted. I owe the Eibishter what I have because he gives me the food that I eat and the air that I breathe and the water that I drink and the life that I have and the peace that I have and the love that I have and the security that I have and the bed that I sleep on, the Ben Shalem. Yeah, those are, we take all those things for granted, but they're incredible gifts. From the Eibishter himself. Okay, now, that's one category, yeah? So if you wanted to think about Mamale Kalalman, Mamale Kalalman is not thinking about the Eibishter, the creator. Mamale Kalalman thinks about the Eibishter, about a provider. When you think about the Eibishter, the provider, you're the center of his abundance, you understand? Hashem gives me, and I appreciate the fact that he gave me, which is selfish. But so what? So what? I can be selfish and think about President Trump. And I'm thinking about Atmos Musain Zog Baruch Hu. Yeah, whoever my mayor is, I don't know. There's a second hisbonenus, which is called Sevel Kam. And I'm telling you ahead of time that there's a caveat. There's one hisbonenus which doesn't fit into any group very neatly. I'm going to leave it for last, okay? Sevel Kalalmin is talking about the insignificance of the world. Hashem is infinite. And the Eibishter makes an investment in his creation. The investment of the Eibishter in his creation compared to what the Eibishter is like nothing. Like Yahalu with Shema Deshem. That means that the Eibishter is so great that his investment in the world is called, in the language of Chassidus, a ha'ara da ha'ara. The Ein Seif of the Eibishter creates this world. How? A couple of words. A parverte. Yes, so you're still thinking about the Eibishter, and you're still thinking about the world, but you're not thinking what the Eibishter provides, you're thinking about the relative worth. What is the worth of the world against the Eibishter? And it's nothing. So you know the old joke about a guy who comes to God and he says, listen here, Eibishter, I heard that 1,000 days is a year. 1,000 years is a day. Can you lend me money for a couple of days? Sure, just wait a few minutes. That's up a minute. Yeah. 1,000 years is a day. How long is a few minutes? Yeah. Until they repossess your house and your car with Nachapazach. Yeah. So this is a higher response. You're still thinking about you, but now you're not thinking about you, what God gives you. You think about you, how small you are, how insignificant you are relative to the Eibishter. And of course, the point of this is not to make you feel bad. If you like to feel bad, then by all means, no one wants to take away from one of the great pleasures of life, feeling miserable. It's very popular because it feels so good. If feeling miserable didn't feel good, people wouldn't do it. It's the easiest thing in the world to feel that for yourself. The easiest thing in the world, and that's why it's so popular. And that's why it's a bottomless pit. It's a true quagmire. It's a real quicksand that eats a person alive. And he's saying, it's a Rachmanas on me, it's a Rachmanas on me, and the sand is covering him, it's a Rachmanas on me! Geges and okay, that's maybe not a good visual, but you understand the point. You're not thinking about the insignificance of you relative to the Eibishter to make yourself feel terrible. You're thinking about the insignificance of you relative to the Eibishter to ask yourself, Lo Mali Chaim, what's the point of my life? If the whole investment of the Eibishter in the world is a few words, and the Eibishter ain't soft, shouldn't I get involved with him? Wouldn't that be a good idea? Instead of being involved in the world, which is a few words from this infinite God, I can do a mitzvah. I can learn a little Torah. That's going to engage me with the infinite Eibishter. I'm not going to be involved in the world that was created from a few words. I'm going to be involved in something which is transcendent. This is called Sevev Kalam. Sevev Kalam means the infinity of the Eibishter that relates to the world. The infinity of the Eibishter that relates to the world also acknowledges that there's a world. But the world is so tiny. The world is such little worth, relatively speaking. So a person does his abundance like this. He says, you know what, I can go on vacation and I can eat peaches with cream, or I can learn Torah and do a mitzvah. If I eat peaches with cream and go on vacation, I'm involved in something which is a few words. And if I learn Torah, do a mitzvah, I'm involved in something which is ain't safe. No truth, pick. That's the point of this abundance, not to give you guilt, to make you feel bad, but to give you direction. But this second level also, and like I said, for this also there's a lot of psukim. There's not as many as the first and the third, but there are psukim that don't say there isn't a world, but they don't talk about the Eibishter as a provider. They talk about the Eibishter's relative investment in the world compared to what Kayachal the Eibishter is, and it's insignificant. Nothing. It's prevent. And then the third is bonus. The third is bonus is kuluk make lachashiv. What's the third is bonus? The third is bonus is pasha to think about Hashem. Don't think about yourself. Don't think about yourself relative to the Eibishter. Think only about the Eibishter. And for this, there are famous psukim. Yeah, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Where are you in that pasuk? Ata harei saladat Yavayu hu Elokim ein eid milvade Yadai Tayim Vashvei Zolavecha Kad Hashem Elokim V'Shema Yimav V'Oz Mitacham ein eid. Right? Ani Havai Elei Shanisi you have in Tanya. And there are others. Psukim that declare the unity of God. The psukim that declare the unity of God don't even mention you. Just think about the Eibishter. No, when you think about the Eibishter, how valuable are you? You don't exist. Because next to the Eibishter there is nothing. In the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so I just gave you three categories of His abundance. You understand? I'm not just giving you three meditations. It's three levels. The first level is you think of the Eibishter as a provider, which means you're really thinking about the Eibishter in a very subjective way. I like the Eibishter because of what the Eibishter does for me. The second level, you're also thinking about the Eibishter in relationship with you, but you're appreciating not the Eibishter vis-a-vis you, but the Eibishter vis-a-vis the emes, and then you say, you know what, my life without the Eibishter is pretty empty. It's pretty nothing. The third is bonus. You don't even think about you only about the Eibishter. It's called Yechudei Allah, it's called Achdas Hashem, it's called Tzimtzum Shalei Kipshut, it's called Eid Mevade, all those wonderful statements. So you see, you look at Ramadi Chassidus, you'll find meditation. That's how it works. Ramadi Chassidus give you his bonus. One Maimah gives you one his bonus, a second Maimah gives you a second his bonus, a third Maimah gives you a third his bonus. And the difference between the Hizbayin and Nuyais is not only what particular form one is contemplating, but what particular level. And because you have three levels. Yeah, the first level is called Mamalei Kol Almin, how the Eibishter is a provider. The second level is called Seven Kol Almin, how the Eibishter's investment in the world is insignificant compared to what the Eibishter is. And the third is bonus is the Eibishter himself, where there's nothing but the Eibishter himself. Now, as a teacher, I want to give you all the information. There's one meditation that's very hard to pin down where it belongs. One Maimah puts it in category A, another Maimah puts it in category B, and maybe there's another put it in category 3C also. What that is bonus is Yesh Me'ayin. Contemplating the idea that the Eibishter creates the world every second from nothing into something. When you contemplate the idea that we're not just an existent reality that Hashem provides for, but that He provides for the reality itself. In other words, Hashem is not only the soul of the world in which we live, He's the world itself, He's the body of the world. Moreover, His being the body of the world is b'chol rega v'rega. Every second the Eibishter speaks words that make this world come into existence from absolute nothing into the world in which we live. Now, where do you put that? It sounds like a little more than Mamalei Kol Almin. Why? The Mamalei Kol Almin provides for me. Yeah, this is saying that the Eibishter creates me. Without the Eibishter, I don't exist. So it's a little more than provision. A little more than I like me and God's looking after me. There's no I, right? So Yesh Me'ayin is, if you look at the Chassidus, you'll see that my Morim struggle where to place it. Sometimes they'll place it with the Mamalei Kol Almin. Sometimes they'll place it with Seven Kol Almin. The Eibishter creates nothing in the second, every single second. So what are you? Yeah. And you could even place it in the third category. And again, when you learn this, when you study this and you observe it, and you try to put it all together, Yesh Me'ayin remains an anomaly. It doesn't fit neatly into one group. But that's basically the story. Now, believe me, I have learned very little Chassidus. Relative to what there is to learn, I've learned very little. So, believe me, someone can come along and say, what you just said is a half a picture, a quarter of a picture, it's a distorted picture, and there's more. But this is how I see it from my learning. That you have the close three types of Hizbonenus, and there's many different psukim and many different Mamori Chazal that provide framework and kind of discussion for each of these three groups. The first is Mamalei Kol Almin, which you're thinking about the Eibishter as one who gives life. To me, the second is Seven Kol Almin. You think about the Eibishter as giving life, but you're discussing the relativism of the Eibishter to the world that He created. And the third is there's only an Eibishter, Ein Milvadeh. And Yesh Mayayin doesn't fit any place neatly. So the Alter Rebbe here brings all three one after the other. Malak Kalam, and Seifman, Kulak Kalam, and Geitzrik Shlofen. In other words, when you read this Perek Tanya, it's a few lines, it's not a lot of words. But the words are very, very meaningful, because the Alter Rebbe is not saying you should do all three. Alter Rebbe is saying do one or the other. One chassid doesn't mean Malak Kalam, but by them halter. He's not about to say I don't exist. You know, and if I bring and you smash the other guy in the head and you tell me I don't exist. But Chas v'Shalom, he should smash you in the head and say you don't exist. And then the world will turn inside out. Yeah? We are what we are. It's small little people. Oh yeah, we small. And oh yeah, we little. And Alavai we should be people. Yeah? But we're also Jews. So if I'm going to think about how the Eibishter provides for me, that's a madrege. I'm involved with some of the Eibishter. Sure, there's a self involved, but I'm dedicating myself to acknowledging the source of my plenty, of my blessings, that it's Atmos Hus, and not the employer who writes me a check with an angry face. The Eibishter. Then there's a higher Isbonus, there's an even higher Isbonus. So the Alter Rebbe here, in these few words, is really describing an Indian which is more involved than it seems. Eichel Malak Alaman is one chassid. Eichel Sevel Kalaman is a different chassid, or that same chassid many years later. And Eichel Kulak Meklachashiv is the highest chassid and the greatest chassid. And the Rebbe told to tell the Meiser. But the Gewaldike Koch, he told it many times, but I remember the Sikha, it's going out to Purim, Kom Rabbi V'Shachtel Rabzede. The Shabbos after Purim, it's unforgettable. And the Rebbe told the story. There was a chassid who was a big businessman, and he was doing a tabulation and accounting of his green and his red, what he gave out and what he took in and all the rest of it. A businessman. And he wrote Sach Hakel, Einig Mulvadi. Sach Hakel, the conclusion is there's nothing besides that. All the numbers were right, so he didn't make a mistake in the numbers. Sach Hakel, Einig Mulvadi. You know, I could do that too. Every month when I do the banking, I could write at the end, Sach Hakel, and I'll be sure to some wife, look, see I'm a big chassid? I wrote Einig Mulvadi. But he meant it. Or to say it in Tibet. And Badem Gehalt, when he wrote the conclusion of all my business, this Einig Mulvadi, he was in that world, he wasn't in this world. That's called a big chassid. He's so involved with the Eibishter that even though he's making so much money in Elam Hazeh, it's real to him that besides for the Eibishter there's nothing. What about his money? It's the Eibishter. What about his stock? It's the Eibishter. What about the few pennies he keeps himself? It's the Eibishter. It's awesome. But the most important thing is that it's serious. In other words, it's personal. It has to do with me. But to write Sach Hakel Ein Eid Mulvadi and it's still somebody else's 10 cents, that's Bubba Mises. It's not even hypocrisy. It's lying to self. Lying to self is the worst kind of hypocrisy. So the Alter Rebbe, in a few words, is representing a lot of things. It's only one line. Memale Kalam and Seviv Kalam and it reads like, you think 5 minutes this and 5 minutes that. You're talking about 5 lifetimes. You understand? Seviv Kalam is one world. Seviv Kalam is a different world. Kulak Mek Lochshiv is a third world. But whatever your level is, if you think about the Eibishter in a way that relates to you really, you're me'eder, nailed on midas hareim with b'meichim. And then that near Pachad of Arab Liebe. In Shuv Yislai Liebe with the Ava, Aza, Kedish, Beyesh, all the words that Rebbe use about a human being, a bus of a dog, feeling in his heart or her heart a love for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And it begins with his mother. So this is today's class. It was a lesson. It was a lesson on his bonus. I did it in one class, which is a miracle in itself.